Welcome. My name is Julian Harper. I'm one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. Right now I'm here with one of my co-hosts, actually two, but I'll introduce them one at a time. First of all, Noel Leader.
Hotep family, it's good to be here once again for another Tuesday. We always look forward to getting here to have these open discussions. As our brother one time said, this is where truth and real talk occurs. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong camera.
Absolutely. We will have, hopefully, Mike and Father Lucas will be joining us soon to add some of their perspectives to some of the things that we talk about. As you guys know, last week we talked about, and I'm going to bring this in very quickly and briefly, and I'm sure we'll continue the conversation once Mike comes to the set. We were talking about the movie Black Panther, and it's become somewhat of a phenomenon because everyone is talking about it, and I'm not talking about just nationally, globally. This movie has been a great, great hit. And last week, Michael and Noel hadn't had an opportunity to view the movie as of yet. I had already seen it, and this weekend they got an opportunity to see it. We had a conversation about the movie, myself and Noel, about the overall enjoyment of the movie and some of the things that, you know, they talked about that has a reflection on some of the plights and of the issues that African people have gone through in this nation and globally. So, first of all, how did you enjoy the movie?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would like to say, yeah, I definitely did enjoy the movie. You know, it's kind of, you know, there's so much, I mean, on one aspect, it is a movie. You know, it is a movie created to entertain the masses. But you know, this particular movie just so happened to take on a life of its own because of the significance that it meant to a lot of people of African American descent that had the opportunity to look at, first of all, a black superhero, and then look at Mother Africa in the context of it being a beautiful, civilized, cultivated country, you know, the fictitious country of Rwanda, I think it was, right? So there were so many aspects, but at the end of the day, it was still a movie designed to entertain, and so it had you know, its typical theme of, you know, good guy, bad guy, but there was so many, so much in there that we can elaborate on and appreciate, you know, and that so many people are talking about. But as you stated, the commercial success of the movie is unprecedented. It broke a few records, and you can imagine that it will, as it goes internationally, break you know, many more records. But we definitely want to, you know, not only talk about our appreciation for it just as a movie, but then all the significant and the symbolic roles and subjects and occurrences that happen, you know, while you were viewing the movie.
Right, absolutely. Now, Mike, first of all, we have Michael Graves here, Big Mike. All right. Mike, I know you had an opportunity to view the movie as well this weekend, and unfortunately last weekend when we talked about it briefly, you guys hadn't seen it yet. First, how did you enjoy the movie?
Oh, I enjoyed the movie immensely. I thought it was nothing short of awesome. The movie was well done. It was a nice storyline to the movie. You could see a lot of money was put into it. Well done. It was comparable on the level with all those mega movies that Marvel has been putting out. I thought they would shortchange the Black Panther, but that didn't happen. They seem to have put the technology and the money behind the movie as if they were doing the Avengers or Thor or all those other movies. So I thought on that level it was outstanding. But what really stood out to me was the reverence for African culture, which took me by surprise. I was surprised that there was a respect for African culture continent-wide. Africa is a continent, not a country, but you saw basic cultures immersed in Wakanda. And I thought that was awesome for them to be speaking in the South African dialect at times, for them to show cultural points from all over, reflecting ancestor, everything from Igbo, Akan, and so many other very, very old African cultures. I thought that part was outstanding. Even you saw ancient Kemet, even though with all those Western cultures and Southern cultures, you saw them go across their chests. And that's ancient Kemet. That's a symbol. So ancient Egypt was in line with, and certainly the Nile Valley experience. That includes the entire Nile Valley. So we're talking all the way down south. So that's the oldest people on the planet is from Southern Africa. So it was amazing to see the respect and the high regard for African culture, including even ancestor worship. It was exercised in the movie.
Noel, let me ask you a question. Now, you mentioned earlier as movies are made, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy, but there was kind of a torn sentiment when you talk about the two leading roles, the king or the newly pronounced king and the son of the king's father. There was a kind of sense of being torn on who was the hero and who was the person who was, I guess, more detrimental to the needs of African people throughout the diaspora globally. Did you find yourself, if you want to say, did you find yourself kind of betwixt, or were you immediately able to determine who you thought in your mind was the hero? Now, let me just say this. I read a piece in one of the newspapers where the lead, the king, and I'm terrible with names, so I'm not even going to try to recall, but the lead, he said that he was actually the nemesis. He was actually the bad guy in the movie. What was your perspective of that?
Well, what's interesting is that, at the genesis of the overall theme of the movie, the storyline was this country called Rwanda, right? Wakanda. Thank you. I'm horrible with names as well. It was an African country that was far advanced more than any country in terms of its technology, its medical coverage, I said technology already. So they had advanced sciences, advanced mathematics, advanced everything. And it was a peaceful society, a peaceful country, and you had an African king who ruled over it, of course.
I'm sorry, let me just say this.
Yeah.
Anybody who hasn't seen the movie, it's going to be a spoiler alert. If you don't want to hear about it, then turn your volume down, because we are going to discuss it. I'm sorry,
I hope I don't spoil it for too many individuals. And his objective, his goal, was to utilize his technology and advancement that they had in all the sciences, including medicine, for the benefit of his country, and not to extend it out. They had sort of hidden themselves from the world because they understood that once their advancement and their cultivation and civilization was exposed to the world, that it might bring them problems. It might bring them invasions from outside world. Other people might want to come there and dilute their culture. So the leaders of this society, this nation, wanted to preserve their culture intact and didn't want outsiders to come in and intrude. The other individual who was his so-called adversary, he understood that the plight of Africans and African Americans throughout the diaspora wasn't as good outside of Rwanda as it was inside. So he wanted to take that advancement and bring it to the African Americans and help liberate and benefit African Americans all over the world. He thought that in particular, the military advancement that they had developed should be utilized to free black people in America and throughout the Americas, other places on the continent. And there was a battle of philosophies between the two main characters, and I know that's what you talk about. Who do you side with? One who wanted to say, listen, we can't expose what we have, because if we help individuals, even African Americans outside of our nation, it'll bring us open to a lot of scrutiny, maybe some invasion, which will ultimately dilute our culture. And then you had another person that said, listen, all this technology we have, there's black people outside of our nation that are suffering. We should assist them in liberating themselves, from colonization, from oppression, exploitation, and use our civilization, our society to benefit Africans all over the world. So that was a very interesting, which one do you side with in terms of when they had a physical, confrontation?
Against the philosophies.
Right.
Mike, now, I want to ask you a question based on juxtaposing the movie with reality, because the vibranium. That's, if I remember correctly,
Yes,
that's what it's
sir.
called. The vibranium, which was a natural resource, which allowed them to have all of this technology and utilize all this, the equipment that they had, and through medicines and through weaponry and all this other stuff. Juxtapose that to the realities of the continent, with the riches that are on the continent, have been on the continent, has been extracted from the continent, where people have abused. And we talk about the colonization. I remember one part of the movie when I think he was a CIA or FBI agent came in, and the young lady called him, "Oh, how you doing, colonist?" You know, she referred to him as someone who colonized Africa. How do you juxtapose the, lack of a better term, mythological aspect of the movie to the realities of the abuses and the extracting all the riches from the continent?
Well, unfortunately, Wakanda is real. It's not mythological.
Exactly.
No, when I say that, I'm talking about the name of, with the movie, the way they portray it.
And this is my answer.
Okay, go ahead, brother.
Wakanda is real. Wakanda has happened. Unfortunately, it's happened over the last several centuries. And then in 1884 became a direct frontal assault on the entire continent. Now, when you think of these various philosophies that Noel was talking about, it's all too real. Africa has been the breadbasket for Europe and America. However, when you look at the various philosophies with respect to how you're going to move forward, self-determination, they're all too familiar. You know, you saw the Frederick Douglasses that on one hand was brilliant on one level, but on another level wanted to work with white folks. You saw the Martin Delany types that was black first, black, unadulterated black. You seen the Henry Highland Garnetts. Strong, black, and want to fight. Let your motto be resistance. You saw that. You saw those who were about integration and about sharing technology irrespective of history. History has to be your guide. History has to be your guide, because that's what Malcolm, said that, basically, that history, is the best teller of how you're going to proceed. He said, of all the disciplines, history is best qualified to reward the researcher. Consequently, we're talking about a situation where, given that history, you can't help but wonder, why would you make this assessment based on history? But obviously, there are people today who believe in integration. There are people that believe in, if they had to do it again, the civil rights movement, the traditional civil rights movement. There are other people who would be in the black liberation movement, the black power side of the movement. You saw all of these aspects in it. You saw those who personally would benefit. You saw those who are insensitive to people outside their immediate community. In other words, when Noel was talking about Wakanda, he's talking about one area had a certain advantage over the rest. Now, they did not deny them brotherhood and sisterhood, but would not help them. Consequently, they said in a very dogmatic way, we're here to defend Wakanda. It's all about Wakanda, not anybody else. Now, that's very elitist, extremely elitist, when you only think about yourself and you see people that look just like you suffering. Now, that sister you talked about, Julian, it was kind of her to refer to a man as a colonist. Well, she could have called him a murderer. She could have called him every kind of thief, exploiter, plunderer you can imagine. It was kind of her to use the term colonist, as if you just colonized the country, but you didn't rape no black women. You didn't kill black men that tried to defend their women. You didn't kill no black boys. You didn't rape no little black boys. So it was kind of her just to refer to him as a colonist. In other words, you have some economic goals that you want to exploit the country. No, they were murdering and doing a lot of other things.
And, you know, when Michael says that this did happen, you know, the fictitious nations of Wakanda, I'm going to get it right. You know, that can be substituted for the entire continent of Africa.
Right.
Because at one time, Europeans, they used to refer to Africa as the dark continent, because since Europeans were the last nation, the last group of people that traveled throughout the globe, you know, a lot of times people think that, you know, Africans never ventured out of ancient African societies can be found in India, can be found in Asia, can be found throughout the South America.
That's
Africans were in Americas before Christopher Columbus. And it's not debatable. Everybody know that. So Europeans were the last ones to venture off of their continent into other territories. So they used to one time refer to Africa as a dark continent because they had very little knowledge about it. And when they found out about the enormous treasures of Africa, when they found out about the enormous amount of resources, because everybody knows that Europe is a dead continent. It is not rich in natural resources. It's not rich in anything. You know, none of the substances that are mandatory to survival. When they discovered that Wakanda, Africa, was this treasure, this valuable territory, they all got together and said, listen, we're going to invade this continent, but we're not going to fight each other. And they had a conference called the Balfour Conference. And where they set off plans to invade Africa. So it is
the
Berlin Conference. I'm sorry, the Berlin Conference.
Oh, Berlin.
That was a different conference where they all organized themselves and invaded the continent. So in the historical sense, Wakanda, I got it right?
You got it right, brother.
Can be substituted for Africa in terms of at one time being the treasure chest of the entire planet. It led the world in architecture. It led the world in mathematics. It led the world in education with the universities. It led the world in medicine and every science that you can imagine. And so that was, you know, when Michael said that it was real, and although the story is fictitious, the history of Africa, when we really investigate it, when we really understand, you know, Africa's contribution to the planet, you know, it was really a real story. Now, if you look at Africa today, and you look at the desolation that exists as a result of colonization or invasion and murder, where Europeans and Arabs invaded the continent because of its richness, because of what it had to offer the entire globe, you know, was that a benefit? You know, would it have been better for Africans just to say, you know, because one time Africa invited other people to study at their universities. You know, one time Africa shared its literature and its technology and its science and its mathematics with the world. That's when the world was a, you know, much friendlier place. And some people would say that that's to Africa's detriment, because when some people had the opportunity to see what was there, they wanted it for themselves. And they wanted to claim that we started this is ours, not yours, and that's the world we live in today.
So now that goes to, now if we look at the two positions, the newly appointed king, well, I'm using the term appointed. He actually had to fight for his position. But the newly appointed king, they didn't want to allow the Western world to share in their natural resource, which allowed them to have all these things. The son, which was turned out to be his cousin, who was fighting to use the riches to liberate the rest of Africans throughout the diaspora, had a different position. I believe that it was a difficult choice for the newly appointed king because he wanted to see his people prosper, but he saw the detriment that could exist, at least I believe, and like I said, I have to watch the movie again, the detriment that could exist if he allowed the rest of the world, the European nations, to see what they had and take part in some of the utilizations the uses that they had for their natural resource. Mike?
Well, I understand what you're saying, and certainly the movie is so comprehensive that you can walk away with that feeling. You can walk away with a lot of feelings. However, to share a resource that is so valuable, to share that, you really have to dismiss 500 years of history. In order for you to truly share something, and the reason I'm not being specific is because the metal had a lot of capabilities other than just being a hard metal. It was considered the hardest substance on the planet, in the universe, but it had some other unique qualities which you see when you see the movie. However, to share that, because it was extremely significant, to share that you have to dismiss 500 years of history, because you have to remember that going back to the late 1480s is when Europe actually started invading Africa. Now, they knew about Africa because Africa is the birthplace of civilization. They knew about Africa because it was the cradle of civilization. They knew about Africa because Africans traveled all over the planet. Consequently, they knew of its existence. And certainly the first people who were there, the Greeks, and then later on the Romans, admired what they saw and gave it great reverence. But to be at this late juncture, I think they started, and it's amazing. I don't want to take too much from the movie, but let's say the movie started in 1966. And for those who are familiar with our history, you know that's the year the Black Panther Party started, in 1966. The movie started also in Oakland, California. You well know that the Black Panther Party started in Oakland, California. So there were significant parallels there with the Black Panther Party, 1966. The situation which I won't specify, but with the king before T'Challa, his father, that happened. That situation happened with him and his brother in 1966 in an apartment building, and the way things went is what influenced the latest story, what happened in 1966. And that's the year the real Black Panther Party for self-defense started. And that's where the Black Panther Party started at, both in Oakland. And a little boy, I'll just say, a little boy who was Wakandan was left after the two grown folks were gone, and another person who was a spy. But it won't rob the movie. Just saying that he was a person who was keeping tabs on what was going on here in America, because Wakandans had people all over, but he was keeping tabs on it. And when he found out a certain information, things were done between the two individuals, and there was a little boy caught up in the mix whose birthright is from Wakanda, but he grew up in Oakland around the Black Panther Party, around gangbangers, in the hood with all the stuff that was going on, and yet he had the focus of mind to know who he was, where he was from, and he had a plan to eventually fight. And that's one thing that I'll say, and it won't hurt things. He fought against the intelligence community, FBI, CIA, and even though he trained in their tactics, he special forces guy, learned all the stuff that they can do, and he eventually used it against them and was going to wage a worldwide war against them, but unfortunately the Wakandans weren't with it, and it took some doing for him to get certain forces on his side. That brother right there was on his side. And, so I'm saying that's an interesting dialect. It's interesting to say these different philosophies were at war with each other. Father Lucas.
No. I don't know if he. Okay. Did you want to go yet, or you want to go to Noel, Father?
I just have a few things because I haven't seen the movie yet. Believe it or not, I live in Harlem. The Magic Johnson, the theater where it is being showed, the crowds are around the block, and you'd be surprised the number of white folks who are there to see it. So I hope to get to see it this week. But I thought while your brothers were talking, that the United States talking so much nonsense now about Russia interfering with and then the Emirates interfering with our elections. We not only interfere with the elections, particularly in these countries, we depose rulers, assassinated rulers who were legitimately elected, like Patrice Lumumba, etc., and because of, again, the white man's greed, either for cobalt in Congo or something like that, or else oil in Yemen and so forth. So the hypocrisy of this country knows no end.
And, you know, like Father said and like we said earlier, you know, that is the basis of a lot of colonizations or invasions by European nations, you know, because when Africans, we talked about Africa visiting the United States. When Africans visited the United States with all the technology and advancement that they had, they didn't come here to invade. They didn't come here to kidnap and bring indigenous Africans back to, indigenous Americans back to Africa like the Europeans did. They didn't see that they had gold and say, yo, listen, we're going to come back here and steal all their gold, you know, like the Europeans did when the indigenous population welcomed Christopher Columbus and his you know, hoarders and his invaders. You know, they welcomed them. So the Africans had a totally different mindset as they traveled and interacted with the Asians, you know, with the Arabs, you know, with the indigenous Americans, other than the Europeans. And there goes the problem that happened in America is, and there goes the destruction of the indigenous population, because once Christopher Columbus came in and found out they had gold, he went back home and said, listen, man, you give me a couple of men, we can take this whole thing. So when you look at the theme of the movie, you know, that's basically the theme, the two warring factions or different philosophies. Should we just remain you know, inclusive and not expand this technology and not let everybody know what we have, because then it perhaps may be in jeopardy? Or should we, you know, utilize it to, you know, free out people all over the world? And then at the end of the movie, real quick, the king made a decision, which I disagreed with, you know, that we're going to share this with all humanity. You know, with history being a teacher, as Michael said earlier, if that was real, and it was real in other senses we talked about, but you can imagine the European strong nations that sat back and said, oh, they got this? We didn't know about that, because this was a hidden nation, mind you. Nobody knew about Wakanda. And the technology that they had. So, but now when the king at the end said he was going to come back with this beautiful speech, remind me of Nelson Mandela, you know, that, you know, if it was like 50 years after that speech, I would like to see how his nation was, you know, as a result of his his declaration that they're going to expand and share their technology and their information with the world.
Now I have a question. You know, everything in life could be and should be a teaching moment.
Right.
As our youth have an opportunity to watch the movie, speak to other members of the community, listen to the adults in our community, is there anything, because as I looked at it, I think there can be in one part, an economic learning moment, and then a philosophy learning moment in that movie. Did you guys see anything relative to a teaching moment for our community and for our youth? Mike?
Yes, I think it's very important that you speak to the youth. I think that do not solely be exuberant over the fun that children had. That wasn't necessarily a children's movie, but the children that were there that day when I saw the movie loved it. It was a lot of action, a lot of things going on, and it was catered in a way where children are going to love it. The danger is that when you start thinking your enemy is your friend and start thinking, you know, or reverse it with the friends being enemies. The facts are, when the movie ended, the CIA agent, a white man, had a celebrated place in the movie. He would be pictured as a hero. If you do not tell the children, he's not a hero. There were other people, including the Black Panther himself, truth be told, you can raise questions as to was he truly the hero, or was the so-called adversary in the movie the hero? I would tell you that was also another person. That guy Claw was a cold-blooded killer. He had some of the technology already, and part of the movie was that there was an assignment. I won't say who. You see when you see the movie. Somebody was supposed to take him out. They failed to do so. They were trying to bring him back without taking him out. And so ultimately, the person who did take him out was not the king. And ultimately, that created a deeper rift within certain philosophies in the movie, and rightfully so. Because how could you ever, on your worst day, give the most powerful substance in the universe to your enemy? You know, African saying, only a fool allows the enemy to teach his children. Well, you got to be 7 times a fool to give the strongest weapon in the universe and share it with your historical enemy that's been your open enemy for a minimum of 500 years.
All right. As you guys know, our phone lines will be open very shortly. You guys will have an opportunity to call in and talk about, you know, the show or other topics if you choose. Noel.
You know, off subject, we just talked about a recent occurrence that happened in the New York City Police Department where, you know, you have hundreds of officers still on the payroll that have been found guilty of committing a whole lot of atrocities. I mean, there's so much that can be said about this administration, even in their choosing for a new school chancellor. You know, you have such a large percentage of African Americans within the New York City school system, and I don't know why. You know, you didn't even have an African-American candidate. This administration continuously shows this totally disregard and this disdain for members of the African-American community. We talked about their selection in the law enforcement circles, how there's not one commissioner in any law enforcement, be it corrections, be it police department, Department of Investigations, probation department, Department of Parole, all headed by whites. In this community, our community continues to support this so-called liberal, so-called progressive, and his choice for a school chancellor. I've never seen an African-American, and I know there has to be at least one, and I know there's more than one African-American who qualifies for the position of school chancellor in New York City, but once again, you know.
Yeah, and when you talk about these positions, it seems that the people that they choose never have a vested interest in this community. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about this collectively throughout the entire city. If you talk about the as they so call it, the melting pot of New York City, these people never have a vested interest in this city. They usually get people from outside. They get people from even outside of the 5 boroughs to be either commissioners, but they never have a true vested interest and a true concern of the members of this community and the youth of this community. I'm sorry, Mike.
Well, just want to say real quickly, because I see callers are calling in, even though the number's not on the board. I see we have callers already. Let me just say quickly, this is the transition period of Harriet Tubman. We don't know what her original birth date is, but she passed on 3/10/1913, so that's her anniversary. And as you well know, she went down in the South a minimum of 19 times and brought out well over 300 people. We should never forget the great contributions of a military genius. She was a great spy in her own right, knew undercover work better than anybody that's worked undercover. Harriet Tubman, we should never forget her. And quickly, this is the anniversary of the Dred Scott decision, a decision that ultimately in the Supreme Court said that a black man has no rights that any white man is bound to respect. We should never forget that because it's still going on now. That's why so many people are being killed unarmed in police custody. And then last but not least, this is the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Let's always remember that black folks to get the right to vote and to enjoy our civil rights attempted a peaceful march from Selma to Montgomery and was beaten by law enforcement. Law enforcement led the charge and beat the hell out of black folks just for trying to walk over a bridge. So yes, it was white mobs involved, yes, but they were led by law enforcement people that beat black people in a peaceful march.
Okay, all right, we're going to go to our callers, right? Oh, I'm sorry, you had something, Father?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking of what you were saying about the not finding anybody. the name slips me at my age, but the former regent in the state education department.
Adelaide Sanford.
Adelaide Sanford. And her protege. But either one of them would have made a far better educational director than what de Blasio has been able to come up with. But of course, you know.
Well, we're not surprised because these. I'm sorry. Callers. First caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
How you doing, gentlemen? Sonny, Brother Noel, Brother Harper, Brother Mike, and Father Lucas. Good to hear your voice. Your observation on that movie was pretty good. I'm not going to tap dance on it. But one of the things that I appreciated that movie, my daughter hooked me up to it, was the brother who was Americanized. And in his anger, he never used the B word or the N word. And at the end of the movie, he said he wanted to be buried in the middle of pastures with his ancestors. That was so beautiful, brother. De Blasio, you know, we got weak Congressman Meeks, weak Eric Adams, weak Letitia James, weak Hakeem Jeffries. You know, that's why we're suffering, brother, with this situation that we're dealing in this city. And Brother Mike, Hakeem, I think it was Hakeem Jeffries, he's running for Lieutenant Governor. What do you think about that, Uncle Tom? I'll listen and hang up. But that's my observation I got from the movie Black Panther, that brother. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a rhetorical question because if he's a Tom, you know what I think of Tom's already. But I would just say that the brother you named in the movie, certainly he was a nationalist, Pan-Africanist of the highest order because left to his own devices, he would have destroyed every nation that colonized Africa. That was his goal. And so I know some people were happy when they saw the CIA and other forces going against him, but this was a brother that was going to bring white folks to their knees, and he was going to crush them. And so he was a hero to me, if you want me to get it. He was my hero. If there was a hero in the movie, he was my hero because he believed in a scorched earth, and it was going to be their part of the earth that was going to be scorched, and all those riches were going to be proclaimed. Quick little story about the movie. He was questioned quickly in the movie at a museum. He said, he told the lady who was the guide, I'm going to take this piece off your hands because it was from Wakanda. She said, it's not for sale. He said, then how did you get it? Because he understood his history and knew white folks stole everything. And to this day, you can go in museums all over Europe, starting with England, especially in London. You'll see more African stuff than you can get in Africa. They've stolen it all. Consequently, that brother, and I don't want to use the word killmonger because the word monger means either something petty or something contemptuous. You're involved in either petty stuff or contemptuous stuff, and he was neither. What he was doing was not contemptuous. What he was doing was righteous.
All right. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
It's brother. It's Kareem. How y'all brother doing?
Peace, brother.
I just want to say, I don't know whether you brothers are familiar or realize it, but they just closed the UB Blake School. And also, I want to say that some of our people are starting to stand up and tackle this government about putting our own history into the curriculum. I know y'all have been doing a lot on that, and I always emphasize that because that's one of the most important things we need to do is have our young people know our history. We have a blueprint to move forward, but we won't come together and do it. Secondly, I want to just ask the Reverend, what do you feel about this thing with the Catholic people telling the black people that they could not put Malcolm X on their sweaters when they're in school and that's their name, and the fact that this is being a continual thing that's going on, and that should make us come together and demand that our history be put into the school system. And kudos, Sister Harriet Tubman, and we have the blueprint, as I said. We just need to get it put together and move forward. Thank y'all, brothers, for having my comments, and may Allah bless y'all. Peace.
Thank you, brother.
I
Peace,
just
brother.
two things. You had a perfect example of conscious and or unconscious racism there. That's why when we talk about Black history in the curriculum, it has to be taught by knowledgeable Black folks. White folks are in no position to teach us our history. That was about the most ridiculous thing that I've heard in a long time. The brother's name is after the great Malcolm X.
Yes, sir.
And they were allowed to put their names on their jacket, and they became a problem when his name beat Malcolm X.
Right.
And I did a piece, but they wouldn't publish it, of course, in regard to that particular thing. That if that brother had had a picture of Columbus, a murderer, a rapist, a enslaver of human beings, they would have said, right on, brother, Columbus. In fact, I remember when the bishop of that diocese, Bishop said on Columbus Day, he's proud to be Italian. That means he has no concept of the gospel message of Catholic teaching, even though he's the bishop of the Brooklyn Diocese, which covers the Queen Diocese. But he took on Columbus Day, that's like somebody saying on the stupid day, I'm proud to be on a day honoring Adolf Hitler. But these folks, you know, the gospel goes out the window when it comes to racism, whether conscious or unconscious.
You know, it's unfortunate that you know, we have a overwhelming amount of racism that controls, that's utilized in our educational system and throughout every system in this country. And as it's exposed, and it's always exposed, but as it's blatantly exposed, there's no response by people that we believe or that are supposed to be in a position to address this. You know, it continues to grow and to fester. And there was just an article in the paper where a teacher who was exposed as a white supremacist, who's teaching African children in school, and she says, well, listen, my position in that, in the blog that I use doesn't reflect on how I operate and how I feel about these. That's utterly impossible. You know, but this is what we deal with collectively and continuously when you talk about white supremacy.
I remember when I was on the board of WBAI, one of the worst races you'd ever was a teacher of Black students in Philadelphia. You know, and
it's a major issue. I'm sorry. Callers, I apologize. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mike, calling from Harlem, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, I want to ask you folks very briefly, what's your take, I don't know if you read it, in the article in the AMC News about the movie Black Panther by this guy, Ellen Arnell. It's called Why is Black Panther the Biggest Scam of All Black Movies Ever? I don't know if you read it. It's on page 19 of the AMC News. Hey, what's your take on that, gentlemen?
Well, I didn't read the article, but I don't think it was a scam. I think it was a well-done movie. I think that it, like I said, it had reverence for African culture. African culture was highlighted. As a matter of fact, I would not be surprised to see more people wear cultural attire. And maybe, just maybe, you might see less wigs. You might see less weaves than we've been seeing, because there was one scene, and it won't ruin it for you, because I'm trying to stay away from exact scenes, but there was a scene in the movie where a sister took off a wig and threw it down. And I won't tell you what she said, but you'll see that it was contempt. She had contempt in her heart for even wearing a wig and then throwing it to the floor. That made a very strong statement about, you know, we don't have to look white, and why are we trying to look white? So, you know, real strong scene.
And brother, are you still on the air?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, why did they call, because whether or not you appreciated the movie or didn't appreciate the movie, just like hordes of other movies, to categorize it as a scam is kind of baffling. What was the reasons why the author of the article called it, categorized it as a scam?
But it was on page 19, it's a whole bunch of things. This is about how he felt that it depicted black people's house, you know what, as Malcolm would say. He said they're going to fight these things. So there's a guy named Ellen Arnell, page 19, New Hampshire News.
Okay.
Check it out.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, we'll get an opportunity to read it. Okay, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Yes, hello, gentlemen. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Brooklyn, and I wanted to just make a comment about the Black Panther movie, and I agree with the many comments that you gentlemen have made. One of the things I noticed with the movie that I'm hoping that future generations of young people to come in Africa and the United States will actually take from the movie that they need to continue to develop and learn their sciences, their math, so that maybe one day they can create a new Wakanda and be able to develop and make their own flying cars rather than just being able to buy flying cars from other countries. We can actually develop and make it ourselves in Africa and make it ourselves and have the science and technology develop. As you know, right now, countries like China are coming in and taking resources in Africa, and instead of developing it ourselves in the continent, we're letting other countries come and we're buying things from them. So hopefully the young generation will learn that we need to go to the details and develop our own technologies and develop, use science and math to create our own Wakanda. And that's my comment.
Okay, thank you for your call.
And in a minute, there's no more white intervention in our lives here in America or in Africa. We will make flying cars left to our own devices. We will develop technologies left to our own devices because we're talking about the original people of the planet. We did it before. We let the planet and civilization, and we'll lead it again if they leave us alone and get their foot off our throat. And since we know they're not going to get their foot off our throat, we have to develop a system to take their foot off the throat. And maybe it's about time for them to get a foot on their throat.
All right. Thank you for the call. Next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Peace, straight black pride.
Straight black pride.
All right.
Yeah, I'm in New York, y'all. This is Brother Peace.
What's up, Peace?
I'm great. I'm enjoying the show. There's so much to talk about in that movie. I don't want to give out any spoilers, but we could do a class on that movie. There's so much stuff in that movie. And I'm with you, Big Mike, in terms of the brother, the villain in the movie.
Who's the villain?
Killmonger. He is the man.
So he's not a villain.
No, not really.
Okay.
No. He's portrayed because remember Hollywood got their hands in the movie.
Right.
So the image they want to project and the storyline, they definitely want to make someone of that caliber and what he wanted to do and his method to demonize him. But it's an excellent movie. I recommend everybody go see it.
Yes.
And how Africa was portrayed is top notch. And there's a lot of truth to that. Right. I got to get on the train so I can get uptown. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, brother. Thanks for calling. And if we can extract anything from this movie that's going to be a positive and benefit our community collectively, I think it's there, and I think it's going to happen. But thank you for your call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Hey, what's up? Calling out the BS. There's an article, Black Panther is not the movie we deserve, written by Christopher LeBron. Black Panther is not the movie we deserve. So he dives into some of the things that you brothers are talking about. He expands on some things. The so-called villain in the movie is played by the only African American. Everybody else is
continental.
Somewhere else.
Continental.
So he's making correlations to how Black Americans do in this country and their mentality, through this Killmonger. But just pick up the article. It's Black Panther is not the movie we deserve by Christopher LeBron.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And vibranium, something you guys mentioned because there's connection point. This is what Captain America's shield is made out of. the vibranium. So you can take that and plug that into America, export of African raw material to the West, you know, and Captain America's shield is made out of vibranium.
Okay. Quick question. The article you're talking about, where is it written? In what publication?
I want to say the Post is, but it's also in the Boston Review. And I'm going to say the name once again. Black Panther is not the movie we deserve, by Christopher LeBron, think the basketball player.
Okay.
LeBron.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. All right.
Disagree.
There's going to be a multitude of positions and thoughts on the movie. You know, you're talking about millions upon millions of people giving their review and their perception of the movie. So, you know, you take it for what it works for you. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Will you call in for a quick question or comment?
Brother Larry, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Okay, quick question or comment, brother.
I'm appalled with Mexicans being school chancellor, and the first thing came out of his mouth is, when I came to this country. And it's to see how we're getting disrespected with that appointment to the Board of Education. It's just sickening. I see nobody making anything that Hollywood don't deserve all that money that they're getting from black folks to see that movie. I did say last week that I was going to see it on bootleg, but I think y'all done talked me into going and give Hollywood a couple of dollars, and I guess I will see it. Thank you very much.
Okay, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Will you call in for a quick question or comment?
Right.
Go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Yeah, where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Motto Tep family, how y'all doing?
Oh, Maltap, brother. What's up, fam? All right.
All right.
Take your time, brother. Go ahead.
I want to thank y'all for advertising for the African Village along with 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, and let folks know that we were able to have 3 showings. And I want to say economically, because of the fundraiser, we did make a little piece of change off the movie. We didn't make the billions of dollars like everybody else did. But that's one way, in the sense of our communities can raise funds and get a piece of the pie any way we can. But some of the things you were saying about the movie, since I saw it 3 times, each time you learn something new. I might go to the historical part. Even though they started out in Oakland, they started out in 1992. And what you got to understand is the writer, Brian Coogler, who was also the writer and director, he lived in Oakland. So he brought that part in there. So I understand what you're saying, the correlations with the Black Panther Party. But as far as the timeline, it was in 1992 that it came forth. I think one of the things we had at the African Village, we had a discussion on the pros and cons. And of course, the pros outweigh the cons because of the fact of what we're speaking about, African culture, the reverence of our elders, the respect that they gave to the ancestor, the aesthetics that you saw, the black melanated people, especially the black melanated women, darker skin hued people, men. So I agree wholeheartedly that there's nothing that you can if you go see it enough times, you pick up each time the symbolism that's involved in there. You look at the different tribes. Also, when they talk about putting white folks in their place with the colonizer, you got to recognize the Jabari tribe, Brother Mbaku, when the white boy was trying to speak and he put the white boy in the place. I mean, if you missed the part when the white boy was trying to speak and he told him to be quiet, and he said, "Listen, or else I'll feed you to my children." He was hitting on a stereotype, and then he came back and said, he said, "I'm just joking." He said, "We're vegetarians and everything else."
Right.
But he was hitting on the stereotype of what we have had over the years of how people have stereotyped Africa as being cannibalism and whatnot. So there's some things that intricately you can look at in that movie and just bring out the pearls of that. But kudos to the actors. One of the things that came out overall was that we were saying, let's seize the time for this. Whether this is fictitious, whether it's a comic book or what have you, it's an opportunity for us to bring forth African culture and talk more about the way things should be and the way we want things to operate. I think that was those were one of the conclusions that we came forth with.
Okay, good. All right, brother. Well, listen, thank you for your call. We appreciate it, brother. And we'll continue this conversation when we speak later, brother.
Thank you, Cub Master.
Yes, sir. Okay, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
I'm calling from Westchester.
Okay,
all right. That's the teacher.
Yes, it is. How are you, gentlemen?
All right,
sister.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to make it real brief because homeboy before me took up my time.
Right.
I'm going to say, as the daughter of a principal and APs in the New York City system, okay, you got to go back to not Giuliani, but Giuliani, and who came after him. Not Bloomberg, but Dumberg, because they're the ones that started closing the schools, getting rid of CTE schools, such as Gompers and Smiths, because everybody's not on the education track, okay? And then you put in this idiot, Dumb Blasio, who has no real understanding, and he is about charter schools, just as Cuomo. They work together on it. Yes, it's embarrassing. Since Rudy Crew gave them a problem, they don't want us in the system because we know what the system. And trust and believe, parents, if you don't educate your own kids, they're not going to get it. So you have to take them to the Schomburg, you have to take them to the Studio Museum of Harlem, and you have to get them on board because you cannot wait for the white man because the white man will keep them under the radar.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yes, sir. All right.
That's it.
Okay, it looks like we're running out of time. Noel.
Yeah, we might have to have that sister come in and talk about the educational system. Big kudos to Vernon Wells, who was a caller who called a little while ago, left this, the message, and he pointed out the beautiful commentary on the movie, the accentuation of African beauty. You know, the sisters were, you know, and I'm not saying nothing wrong with our light-skinned sisters, but we get inundated with that image, you know, with the straight hair and the light skin and the light eyes. In this particular movie, Africanness was accentuated, and you see that all those so many beautiful sisters that you know were in that movie and had starring roles. So big kudos for that. But a little more, I love you, Lenny Lou, Kitty Cat, the Leader Clan came out in full to watch the movie, and it's always good to be with family, whether it's something very serious or something you know where you can lay back and have a good time. I love you all, Lenny Lou, Kitty Cat.
Father.
I haven't seen it yet, but the Lord knows I'm going to see it. But the emphasis is that education of black folks has to be done by black folks.
Yes.
Right.
You know, very profound to see a black woman throw off a wig with contempt for having a wig. And, you know, very good. It was the wig, weaves, blonde hair and all that. She showed contempt for that, and she was extremely conscious and a leader in her own right. Black man, black woman, protect the black child, accept your own and be yourself.
You know, every moment in life should be a teaching moment. Everything. I think we need to take what we can from this movie, and I'm talking about every aspect, from viewing the movie, from the economic aspect that it brings to Hollywood, how we generate so much economics or money or economics for Hollywood. I mean, there's a lot of power in being black. You know, and understand what I'm saying. There's a lot of power. And we need to hone this power and utilize it to benefit African people globally. So we can't forget that. Harper family, I love you guys. Thanks for being here and supporting me. Leader family, Graves family, Father Lucas with all his loved ones, and our production team. And you guys are doing a phenomenal job. We appreciate you. Nat, Veronica Kidd. Well, Nat Woods, let me say his full name. Veronica Kidd. Sheila Berry. Come on, Noel, I know I'm leaving out names. Lulu. Baby. Everybody, you guys are doing a phenomenal job. We appreciate the work you guys do for us. And all the guys.
I really like that piece of the movie also when the white male has put his hands on the king and the sisters